Previously on the SoJo Files.
Okay, so here's the November 8th story about the truck. That truck in that condition is what the officers took possession of in order to, what they thought would be, use it as evidence against him.
And the truck is basically in the best condition the investigators could hope for if he was trying to hide anything, because he didn't get an opportunity to do anything after he saw the police were there.
They saw that it was intact. I mean, no one had taken it to a car wash. It was dirty, it was beat up, had stuff all in the bed of it, and there was no blood anywhere.
And what they tested was the door handle, they test the gear shift, and they test, I think, some area of, the steering wheel. All three, if he had any sort of blood on it, it's gonna get on one of those three areas. So they test those three, which is where the blood would be, and they don't find any. But they also don't find anything else in any part of the truck that leads them to think, oh, we should test this.
On today's episode of the SoJo Files, you all are going to be introduced to Billy Turnbough, who is a private investigator as well as a retired law enforcement officer that was hired by the defense to assist in the Shreeve case. So without further ado, I would like to introduce all of you to Billy Turnbough.
Hi there, thank you. I'm Billy Turnbough. I'm a current private investigator who's licensed here in the state of Arkansas. I am a retired law enforcement officer from Springdale Police Department and got lots of experience and lots of well-roundedness. Then, a good friend of mine, great attorney, but more importantly, a great friend, Mr. Atwell, he contacted me and said, I got a case I'd like you to come on board and help me out with. And I said, well, I can do that. I'll stop by and we'll take a look at it.
Didn't you at first say, because Billy is modest and he stays incredibly busy on a host of things because he was a damn fine officer, a very good detective, and he's very well known. But my memory was that initially it was sort of dip a toe in and then you kind of jumped in. Do we have a version of the same memory?
Pretty much the same there. I do remember going down to the police department so I could just, cut open some evidence, just take a look at it, see, what we have and everything. And I remember one of the first pieces of evidence that I was told was inside the bag. I remember opening that, and when I looked inside, I thought, well, I'm going to be in a trial. I knew the very second that evidence was opened that not what was supposed to be in there, but unfortunately what was in there, and just experience and common sense tells you, I'll be on a stand here in the future. And so I thought, well, I'm going to clear my schedule.
So you got hooked into the Shreeve case, and now you're stuck with us and doing a podcast.
It's fun. There's a lot of things about this case that are mind-boggling, and there's a lot of things about this case that people should hear. Law enforcement needs to hear it. They need to cue in and learn some things. They really do.
There are people that will hear me talk about the Shreeve case, and they'll say things like, well, you just hate law enforcement. That couldn't be further from the truth. Because I respect law enforcement, because I acknowledge the risk that they take every single day to serve and protect their community, it is those reasons that I think it is absolutely crucial that we call out cases like the Shreeve case and officers that were in the Shreeve case, because there are morals and ethical standards that we expect someone that wears the badge to have. And if you are wearing the badge and you are not displaying those morals and ethics and work ethic, then you are a disgrace to the badge. When you put it on, when you wear it, you are disgracing all of the officers that are doing their jobs to fight for justice and risking their lives to do so. For those reasons, I think one of the most respectful things that I can do to show my respect for good law enforcement is to call out cases and officers like we've seen in the Shreeve case that disrespect the badge and call into question the integrity and morals of the whole group. For those reasons, I back the blue. Yes, I absolutely back the blue. But I do not back the blue blindly or at all costs, because that is not backing the blue. That is not showing your support and respect for law enforcement. That's contributing to the problem, and there is a difference that we should acknowledge.
You can have a great case of apples to look at when you open them, and there can be one bad apple mixed in, and most people will throw out that whole case.
Look, I did when I was a prosecutor in the metaphor, threw out a case because of a bad apple or a bad accident or even just a bad understanding of what the law at the time was. And, I think that's important for your listeners to realize. I've said it doesn't carry the weight Billy sitting here talking about does. He and I view this case differently. The words that we'll use to describe people and events are going to be vastly different. But I assure you, we have both spent a ton of time on it. And, look, I don't like talking to other lawyers, generally speaking. I don't like them. And there are a lot of bad ones. And that's why there's so many lawyer jokes, right? But, 9 out of 10 are good, hardworking folks that got a law degree. And I think that's true of law enforcement. And I represent a lot of them. And so that's why when we get down to the number of officers on November the 8th, and when people want to assign accidental or incompetent or ill-trained, that there's always going to be a fight erupt if I'm in the room.
I don't think that agreeing with any officer's work, no matter what the facts are, no matter what the evidence shows, makes someone a good police officer. I think that good police officers want justice done. I think they want to see truth followed. I think that to suggest that not backing up a set of Van Buren officers who didn't correctly uncover what happened here, to say that not supporting the officers in Van Buren makes you a bad law enforcement agent or someone who hates cops is pretty ridiculous, in my opinion.
And that's why I think it's so valuable for listeners to hear from Billy and to hear from his perspective, because he isn't someone that covers true crime. He isn't someone who works in the defense sector of the criminal justice system. He is someone that worked in law enforcement for many, many years. Someone who's been a detective, who's worked this position, who has taught at the police academy, someone who's been there, someone who has lived it, someone who still very much lives it, but just in the private sector now.
This case was wow. It was a very interesting case. And at the same time, some of the things that I learned on this case and some of the things I've seen, being a former police officer, it's kind of hard to accept. It's kind of hard to swallow, because when you're a police officer, you care about what you're doing. It's something that you want to do. You want to do what's right. And something that is pounded into a police officer's head is you're always in control. You control it. You say who does what. You stand up. You do that. A person who takes that to literal heart doesn't factor in the human side of things, where instead of learning from a mistake, or instead of simply saying, I messed up, and I'm sorry, but I messed up. And then you take that and understand it, but you apply that in life in general, and you become a more well-rounded officer who has a lot more respect from people, as opposed to the young officers who, instead of, hey, if I make a mistake, I'm going to either cover it up, or I'm going to blame it on somebody else, or I'm going to do whatever is necessary to justify in my mind that I wasn't wrong, even though the facts say otherwise. You have to come with grips that you're human.
At multiple points over years, officers and nearly everyone in this case was given the opportunity to come to grips that mistakes happen. But let's figure out, how do I help you as Jordan's defense counsel, right? Which is a bit backwards, but okay. Again, like, life doesn't always go the way we planned. We got up on a Tuesday. How can I help you in any way, point you in the right direction? Because you're so far off here. It's so far off. And to hear people say things, and many of them said on the record, we got some things wrong. No, but yeah, at the end, we got it right. We got the right person. It just doesn't make any sense. If I tried to pull that in my marriage, I'd be divorced. Oh no, I keep screwing up, but we're still married. Well, we probably wouldn't be for much longer until I realized, exactly like Billy said, how to admit fault, be introspective, and figure out how to get better at life as a human and in my work.
Well, Chad called and said, hey, we need to run down to Van Buren. We need to take a look at this evidence. Sure. I'll do it. Why not?
I think I said, please.
Because I'm thinking of the law enforcement side. I'm thinking evidence. Sure, no problem. It's simple. I know how to preserve evidence. I know how to package evidence. And I know how to make sure it gets logged in correctly. And yeah, sure, I'll go down and do it. I don't mind. And so I get my camera and I go down there and here's all the evidence. And hey, this is the evidence technician. Nice to meet you. No problem. What's the first piece of evidence? Okay, we got it right here. Let me cut that open. Well, crap. Because I know where I'm going to be in a couple of months from now. It's hard to take. I mean, it really is, because of a couple of different reasons. If you take a paper bag and you put a marble in it and then you seal it, and then you put your initials on it and you say inside this bag is a marble, and then you put that in an evidence locker and it sits there until it either goes or doesn't go, whatever they feel is best. Then a couple of months later, I show up and you hand me that bag. I'm going to look at it. I'm not going to ask you what's in it. I'm not going to do that, because I know there's a certain way to do your evidence. And when I look at the sticker and it says 1 marble, okay, so I cut the bag open and there's a Hot Wheel in there. Okay, that is not a marble. That's a problem. That is a big problem. When you package evidence, this is evidence number, you assign a number to it, and then you do a description of what that is. You put it in a bag, you seal it, you put your initials on that seal so you know if it's ever been opened or not. And then you tell your evidence technician, send this to the crime lab and I need DNA, I need some forensics, I need whatever, trace evidence, whatever it is you need. But if you decide this is something I feel is important from that crime scene, but I'm not going to send it to the crime lab yet, okay. You take that, you log it in, the evidence is now in a secure area for an evidence technician, and then it's on them at that point. My job there is done. If I open this bag after all of these steps and there's a Hot Wheel in there, what in the world? Why is there a Hot Wheel and not a marble? How does that happen? So let's say I ask my police officer friend, hey, do me a favor, put this in evidence. And so he puts it in his pocket or he does whatever with it. I mean, I'm putting that responsibility on him now. So now I have to trust that what he's logging in under my name is going to be what it is. And no, you don't do that. You're the investigator. That is your evidence. This is your case. You are responsible for that. Okay. Now, let's just say, hypothetically, I put a Hot Wheel in this bag and then I'm like, wait a minute. Did I put a marble in there or did I put a Hot Wheel in there? Because I don't remember. I just can't remember. Well, dang it. I've already sealed up this bag. What should I do? You tear the bag open and you look in there to say, it was a Hot Wheel or it was a marble. Then you take that out and you start the process over and it's fine. And then when someone comes along and says, why was this evidence entered and then marked for deletion and then turn right around and re-enter? Why is that? I made a mistake. You know what I did? I put it in there and I sealed it up and I took a phone call and I started talking and then I thought, wait a minute, what did I put in there? I don't remember. So rather than take a chance, I cut the bag open and realized, yeah, I made a mistake. I didn't hurt the evidence none, but as far as documentation, I wanted to make sure it's correct. So that's what I did. And that is exactly what you would say to a jury to help them understand that mistake.
Well, now that's an honest mistake. And so you would just say as much and move on.
And that's what you're human. My wife's going to call, kids are sick, I'm hungry, where you at? I'm at work, homicide, call Uber Eats. And during that time, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Forgot what I put in that bag. And that happens. But when it happens 2 times or 3 times or 4 times, or you open a bag and it's not one piece of evidence, what it is one great big huge piece of evidence with 10 pieces of evidence crammed down in the middle of it. It's like a cinnamon roll. What is this? As a police officer, that disappoints me and it bothers me really bad, because the homicides I've worked, the bank robberies I've worked, the burglaries I've worked, evidence is evidence. Evidence is what helps you to solve the crime, and it's what helps you get closure for the family, and you have to protect it and you have to take care of it. And if I go to the evidence locker and there's only 1 bag left and I got 10 pieces of evidence, then I'm going to call my supervisor and say, I've only got 1 bag, but I need 10. And if we have to go down to Price Cutter or Hart's and borrow some bags, then we do it. But that's what you do. but under no circumstances does evidence leave, let alone being put in someone's car or anything else. That is the biggest no-no, because you're getting into cross-contamination and a lot of other things. So you have to take care of it, because evidence is what's going to help you solve that crime. It's special. It's important. You do that. But the more I looked into this evidence, the more I realized it's not good. I even thought to myself, how can this be justified? Let's just say, oh, well, this particular piece was cross-contaminated and I was in a hurry and I messed it up. But I can't make that same excuse when it just keeps going every time you open a piece of evidence and it's the same thing again. Or you open some evidence and it's got material on it that's a bodily fluid that could possibly be blood. I am now in possession and touching everything around. It's contaminated. It's not going to do no good to send it to the crime lab now, because I've already contaminated it. You've lost your evidence. And so you have to think of those things, and you got to think about that stuff a lot. And so I knew at that point, I just remember looking at Chad and thinking, wow, this is not good. And so I left. My wife said, how was your day today? And I said, you're never going to believe it, but she knows I don't talk about those things at home. I told her, she's like, well, what seriously, what'd you do today? And I said, I guaranteed myself to be in a trial at some point in Crawford County, Arkansas. And she's like, how'd you do that? It's like, I'm still processing it. I met up with Chad and we talked, and then I just said, you know what, I'm going to dive into this case, and I'm going to do it the same as I would as if I was the police officer who was working it. I'm going to work this bad boy, and we're going to see what happens. And Chad knows me well enough, as most attorneys do. If I find something that says your boy did it, you're going to know it. And, I'm going to tell you that's wrong. He did it, and here's how he did it. And here's the evidence, and here's the proof. But I never found that with this. And the more I got into this case, the more I realized this is messed up. I mean, there's no other way to say that. So the actual crime scene itself, I remember driving down and looking at this well after the fact. I went down, I wanted to look at the neighborhood. I wanted to get an idea of activity on the street. I wanted to get an idea of everything there. And so I told Chad, I said, well, one of the first things I really need to look at, I need to see that crime scene log so I can take a look. What was handed to me was what I would compare to a readout of a blood sample taken at a doctor's office, because it's just got a bunch of letters and a bunch of numbers on it. And I start looking into it, and I'm like, what is this? Because this is not a crime scene log. That's not what this is.
What would you call
it? Wow. It's a piece of paper that's got a bunch of writing on it and dates and times. And it's got the identity of the police department on top. Wow. That's interesting. I understand technology, and I understand how important it is to make everything look nice and cool and pretty. So it's very easily legible, but a crime scene log is not something that you necessarily want to appear in such a beautiful print like this. And the reason I say that is because a crime scene log is a form that police departments use that is handwritten. Even to this day, you have what I would call a clipboard, literally. You've got the date, you've got the location, you've got the type of crime that you believe happened, you've got weather, you got current temperature, and it says print. That's where the officer would print his name. It's got a signature next to it so that the officer can sign that sheet showing that, yes, I was here, and yes, that's my name. And it has on there what time he enters the crime scene. It also has his purpose for being there, the whole reason he's there to begin with. And then it's also got on there what time he leaves. And then out to the side, the crime scene log officer puts his initials that he has verified all that information. It's accurate, true, and correct. I didn't have any of that. What I had was something that I could easily go home and on Microsoft Word, I promise you, I could duplicate this. There is no signature whatsoever of anybody on here. Nothing.
So throughout your career in law enforcement, this is a crime scene log like you've never seen before. This is not how you do it.
Absolutely not. No. Because with this being like this, I can put anybody's name in there that I want. I can put their badge numbers in there if I want, or I could delete them out of there if I want. And that is not, no, that's not good. You literally want that log and you want to stand there with your clipboard and your ink pen and you want that handwritten. That's what you want. This log doesn't even tell me why they're there. I don't know if this particular officer is there to be security at the back of the house so that we know that that's his purpose. You don't let nobody come across that fence. Or this officer, you're protecting the driveway. Or this officer, you're going to go in there and help the detective with whatever he needs, gathering evidence. Or you're the coroner. Hey, no problem. You need to sign my log. You tell me you're the coroner. I know you're the coroner, but you still sign my log. And so you do that. And what you're doing is creating, in chronological order, everybody who has accessed the scene from the time you're notified and determined that it is a crime scene until it's time to tear down the yellow tape. And that's what you do. And that's how it works. When you present this to a jury, that is exactly how you're going to explain to the jury. I was the crime scene log officer, and this is what I did. Now, you're going to have some supervisors, and especially in smaller agencies, that may say, well, I ain't got the manpower for that. Okay, well, we're sorry that this homicide is such an inconvenience, but you know what? At the end of the day, it's your freaking responsibility. If you need help, call officers off duty. If you don't have that resource, ask for mutual aid from another agency that's bigger. Ask for help from the state police. Tell them we got a homicide, I'm short on manpower, whatever the reason. That's what you do. When you have a scene where you have a dead child, that is not normal, period. You've got to figure out why that child is dead, and you've got to figure out what happened. And therefore, you have to determine real quick, this is a death investigation. You start securing it. You get that yellow tape up, you get out your crime scene log, and you do that. Now, on this particular one, when I saw this crime, I was like, I still don't think it's a crime scene log. They can call it what they want, but you're not going to convince me that's what it is. And it bothers me because as a former detective of my own self here, that was a big deal. I would go to my patrolman and say, when you finish that log, you put it in my box because it's going to go in my case file. I want that. I need that.
At the very least, don't you think they should have scanned a copy of the handwritten crime scene log onto a computer before getting rid of it, before typing it, just to verify that what they typed is a true and accurate representation of the crime scene log?
You have to do that. At a minimum, take it in the human factor. Let's just say that I have a crime scene log and I did everything to the best that I could. You pull your cell phone out and you snap a picture. Or the very second you have the ability to make a copy of that, you scan it. And so that you have something like that. Because you throw it in your passenger seat, you're released, you go on patrol, you have lunch later and you dump your coffee in the passenger seat or something else, and you now have a drenched log that's probably going to get trashed one way or the other. But you know what? Even then, you still would submit that into evidence. And then you write a nice little letter that says, during my lunch break, I dumped my coffee on this. Say I made a mistake, and you document it. And that's all you got to do. Does it make you look bad? Yeah, but it is what it is. Because I would rather look bad telling the truth than to look bad because I'm trying to hide the truth. Because to me, there is a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think on the log, that bothered me. And when I found out it was shredded, wow. I cannot think of any reason a log would go into a shredder.
Because it's one of the most important pieces.
That is the beginning and ending, if you will, of what is happening and what's going on. You've got, it's evidence. Even the log itself is going to be evidence. You know, you've got to be able to preserve that. You don't just happen to be walking by a shredder and it slips out of your hand, flies through the air, goes into the shredder, shreds itself, and darn, what happened? I mean, that doesn't happen. Why would you do that? And so again, after seeing the way the evidence was handled and then seeing something as simple as the crime scene log and the way it was being handled, I was just like, what are we doing? I know what I'm doing, but at this point, I'm so invested now that I'm like, I'm riding this baby to the end. I've got to see what's going on here. So
we left Van Buren PD, and then we went and had early dinner. We all sat, my memory is we all sat pretty quietly because Cody was there as well, right, Cody? Billy was gracious enough to go down, but understand in the middle, Billy had to reach out to his associate, Cody, and have him bring another camera with another battery because he was burning up the battery. We document all of it. And I ask you, what is your initial thought after that, after we all were kind of really silent because some massive things happened that day? Do you remember the one word that came out of your mouth?
I do remember saying, that's not a crime scene. I remember that. And I remember looking at I what has happened here? And I remember being stuck at that. And it was a lot to process.
It's a lot.
I was there were so many things, and every time I thought, okay, deep breath. Here's what we're gonna do. Okay, how could this happen? Okay, well, maybe they made a mistake in the evidence. Okay, well, mistakes happen. Okay, my batteries are dead in my camera. We got a problem here because I'm like, no, we need more photos. I want more. No. I want a lot more.
By the way, the battery is dead in his camera because he wasn't expecting to photograph so many mistakes, not because it wasn't charged or he wasn't prepared.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm having to call somebody else in, and we're having to go through this and do this. And I was like, okay, wow. Okay, I can't justify in my mind the mishandling of evidence the way that it was mishandled. But, okay, so we got somebody that's not really good at evidence. Let me see my crime scene log. Oh, it got shredded. What? How did it get shredded? What do you mean it got shredded? What? I mean, this is serious. This is serious. It's the death of a kid. But I also know that if any point in this time that Jordan was guilty, I would make it clear with Chad. If he's guilty, he's guilty, and I'm done. Somebody kills a kid. No, evidence doesn't lie. You have to be a good police officer, and you got to do it. There were so many things along the way that it went from a yellow brick road to a dirt road with mud holes and big worms. Just saddened me in a lot of ways. I mean, it really did.
And Billy's been, was law enforcement forever. How long now have you been in the private sector?
I've been in the private sector now for about 10 years, a little over 10 years that I've been working in the private sector.
People like me calling him is obviously, like I said, he stays busy, right? So, I mean, he still sees evidence rooms. He still conducts his investigations. And so he has continued to see for the past 10 years some crazy stuff. And this was not the first case that he and I had ever consulted on. But when Billy says he was sad, it's hard to explain this little late dinner we had and this, sadness. At the table, 4 grown men who now were vested in this case, but no one's talking. We've been working all day. I mean, we're also starving. None of us are very little. The other S word that Billy used when I asked him about it, because I'd been saying in the Chad way, these guys are crazy, right? This scene is screwed from start to finish. And Billy's heard that a million times from a million lawyers. And then he went down there with me. I'm like, so? And he's like, I think it's really very scary. That has hung with me, and it will always hang with me because that's what it is. It's incredibly scary. There was nothing to paint a picture or put together a puzzle from the 8th that got you an arrow pointing at Jordan Michael Shreeve. Nothing that did that. But yet, there we were.
A lot of times you're not going to get a defense attorney and a police officer to agree on stuff.
There's that.
Because there's always that argument, that's probable cause. No, it's not. It's reasonable suspicion. There's always an argument, and that's good. It's accountability. And
100%.
It is across the board, everybody doing what they're supposed to do. And when you have me coming up and saying, yes, this is scary, I don't understand how this guy was even arrested on this charge and charged with it. To me, the reason I say that is scary is because how did that come to be? How did he get handcuffed and charged? Because if you stop and think about it, when it comes to a homicide, unless it is a very serious situation, if it's an active shooter, or if it's a situation where you got somebody that just killed somebody, now he's going down the road and he's going to do it again, you bet your butt, you better find that boy, you better find him fast, and you better get him stopped. But when you have something that is isolated like this and it's not a threat to the public, you can use that time on your side and you use that to build your case. There should have been a lot of reviewing of the evidence. There should have been a lot of things. There should have been a way better communication between the prosecutor and the officer. I've had arguments with my prosecutor before going, I'm telling you, no, this is what it is. And I've had him say, you know what, that may be enough to arrest, but it's not enough to convict. And if you want me to try this, then I want the evidence that's going to convict. So you go back and keep doing your job. And then I storm out of there mad and go get something to eat. And I'm like, who does he think he is? And then I calm down and say, okay, he's on my side. So if he says I need more, let's go get it. And that's what you do. I don't see why there was such a rush on this. And one of the things that you want to do, and one of the things that I began to see later in this case as it started going further and further, I think there was tunnel vision. I think there was something that they were like, that just doesn't seem right. And so rather than dig into it deeper, it was like, he did it, he did it, he did it, he did it. I'm going after it. He did it, he did it. What is the evidence telling you?
The opposite, and they very blatantly ignored evidence and what it said, and the fact that it cleared Jordan very clearly suggested one person.
Exactly. And you can't do that. You get tunnel vision. And again, that's why I say there's a little bit of time there that you've got to work with. So you step backwards. You stop and step back. You talk to your fellow detectives. What do you think of this? This is what the evidence, this is what do you see in this picture? And I'm not going to tell you what I see, but you tell me what you see. And you talk about it and you discuss it, and you have that same meeting with your prosecutor.
At the end of the day, everyone is on the same team. Everyone wants to get justice, or should want to get justice, in whatever form justice is for that particular case. Either you want to find the bad guy and find evidence that proves he's the bad guy, or you want to be the prosecutor that convicts the bad guy and gets him off the street, or you want to ensure that everyone is treated fairly throughout the criminal justice system. Chad's job. And when you think about that, everyone is on the same team, and everyone has a specific position throughout the criminal justice system for checks and balances, because checks and balances are how we ensure that the system works and that we keep it morally and ethically sound. And so if you think about it like that, everyone's on the same team. They just have a different role.
You have to have checks and balances.
And as far as the Shreeve case goes, there were no checks and balances on the part of the state. You guys were the only checks and balances throughout the Shreeve case. The state apparently had none.
No. This, I don't, yeah.
See, Billy and I'll never stop doing this, though, entirely, because don't you have to be in a tunnel, Billy, to get tunnel vision? Isn't that where the metaphor comes from? What from the 8th would have put you, with all of your experience, on the track that led to the tunnel of Jordan Shreeve?
First big red flag for me was there's no physical evidence that suggests this guy should even be in handcuffs. I would have been more inclined to go to him and interview him and talk to him and lock in his story. And then I would have went and done the same thing to Mom. And I would have compared, what are these two saying? If this lady comes up and says, oh, he did it, and I'm going to tell you he did it, okay, tell me he did it. Tell me what you know about it.
Say it.
And then she's going to give me all the stuff, and then I'm going to say, okay, tell me more. Give it all to me. I want it all, okay? And then I'm going to take what she says, and I'm going to have to prove or disapprove her credibility, because she could easily be facing some trouble of her own and point the finger at somebody else and say they did it, and I'm going to say they did it. And I'm going to tell the prosecutor they did it, and I'm going to testify that they did it. And okay, I need to know what she's got to say. And if she starts giving me this line of BS, and I start looking at it, and she's like, well, there's a purple rose in the corner, and there's a pink elephant in the backyard. If I don't find a pink rose or a pink elephant or a purple rose or whatever, all right, lady, what are you trying to do here? I'm going to get them locked into their stories. I want to hear what each of them have to say. And then I'm going to see what the evidence has to say. I want to see who's telling me the truth and who's not. I want to push. I'm going to find out. Obviously, if you got someone standing there and they're holding a gun, and there's a person laying there that's dead from a gunshot wound, my thought process is, did that person just shoot and kill them? Or did that person walk up on a suicide and they were scared and didn't know what they were doing, so they picked the gun up? Because I've seen both.
You are evaluating all options.
You have to. What does the evidence tell me? What does it say? This guy's got a bloody nose holding the gun. Okay, and he's obviously been in a fight because his shirt's all tore up. And this guy here has got a bloody face and a bloody nose, but he's dead and he's been shot. He committed suicide. No, I got more questions than that, because that's not what the evidence is telling me. You have to pay attention to the evidence and the evidence will speak to you and point you in the directions you need to go. And that's what you have to do. You can't just assume. But to avoid the assumption, lock them in their story.
After 4 years, would you say that the Shreeve case still haunts you?
Oh, God, yes. Yes. Because I've seen bad police work before. I'm sure in my career I've done bad police work. And you learn from stuff and you do the best you can and you keep going. This is worse than bad police work. And it saddens me. It really does. Because I get a dead child there. Why am I here? What's the whole point of being there? We got to figure out how this child died, and that's what we got to do. That's, And so, yeah, I want to make an arrest. But why be roadrunner if I can walk like an elephant? Take my time, take your time. Get your evidence. Figure out what's going on. Lock these people in their stories. Figure out if their stories are accurate or not.
I prefer to be right, not rushed.
Be right at what you're doing and not rushed. And I could not agree with that more, because that's what you have to do. And if you get tunnel vision that this is the only person that did it, you're not going to be a good police dog. Because police dog, you got to learn from your mistakes. And, when I trained officers, and I've even taught at the police academy, and when you train officers, you teach them and train them. You got to stay focused on what it is you got to do. But you know what? When we're out there on a scene or something and you don't know what's going on, or you're not sure how to answer a question or how to handle it, you just tell the rookie officer, give me a code or say something, and that's my cue to step up and help. And in this case, there should have been a lot of that.
Should have been a lot of things, but it seems to be more lack thereof in the Shreeve case.
It's amazing to me because I arrested him. I got cuffs on him. He's in the news. Arrest is made. Everybody's going to love me to death now, and I'm happy. Where's your conviction? Oh, yeah. The jury said he's acquitted because you screwed this damn thing up. That should be an eye-opener. When you've got 12 men and women of a jury who don't even take an hour to say, this dude is not guilty. You had how long to work this case? And you had how long to get everything in order and gather your evidence and do everything? You had how long to do that? Because the men and women of the jury, how long did they have? And they were able to pick it out that quick. It was that obvious. Got to learn from it.
Well, I'm sure they'll learn from it and become better officers of better human beings by taking a look at their mistakes and then proceeding with an incredibly thorough investigation to try and get some sort of closure for the Soto family or justice for Olivia, regardless of whether their idiotic decision to prosecute a person without any evidence makes the second one harder. I, Billy, will continue to keep my faith in humanity somewhat, but I look forward to seeing that investigation open and to seeing a felony information filed against someone.
Yeah. You've got an acquittal on Jordan, as it should be, and you've still got this family in the courtroom that is, their hearts are ripped and tore, and their grandchild is gone, their child is gone. I hope that when the acquittal was announced, I'm sorry for that family for being so devastated, but I hope that the officers involved will never forget to look on that family's face. And I hope they understand that when you're a police officer, you're not out there to write tickets and look good and run lights and sirens everywhere. There's more to it, because when you do things as a police officer, you're impacting people's lives. And if you stop and think about it, as a police officer, do you realize you are authorized and on a every single day basis that you put a gun on your hip and you go out there and you take on the world? And the amount of responsibility for that is just phenomenal. And it is a lot of stress and it's a lot of weight on you, but it's something that you chose. So if you're going to choose to do something, you do your best and you give your best. And if you're a detective and this is your homicide case, that's what you do. You do your best. Do what the evidence suggests, because that's where you're going to wind up doing it. And you got to remember, it's not about making an arrest. It's about the arrest and the conviction. You've got to have both. And the evidence is what's going to get you there.
I could not agree more. And on that note, that's a wrap for this episode of the SoJo Files, and you will be hearing from all of us, including Billy, on the next episode. And if you enjoy listening to the SoJo Files, make sure to check out the sister station, The Situation.